Okay. Carson Cunningham, how we doing?
I'm doing well. It's very windy here in Oklahoma. I can see the wind blowing your trees out by the shed. It's my first visual of the shed this season, so that's a positive.
Yeah, it's really windy here too. Not good. It's been yeah. The weather last night in Fort Worth was phenomenal though. That's about the only thing that was phenomenal, but the weather was great.
Was it windy? Because I think that's an excuse for why they couldn't complete a pass. Was it that windy?
No, but I did. I get cold if it's under like 77, and so I was wearing gloves at the end of the game, even though it was literally like 60. It was like in the 60s, and I was wearing gloves. I'm the softest media member on the planet.
Well, you're from Houston, so like you can leave Houston, but Houston never leaves you. You're used to like 100% humidity. The most suffocating heat I've ever experienced is in Houston. So that's just in your blood. It's in your DNA.
You know what's bad is that Oklahoma State now wants to try and, like, Houston would be a revelation for this team in terms of a bowl game after we're kind of waiting for people to pour in. We just posted this on the site. We're going to, if people don't catch all of it, we are going to, we're going to post it afterward. We'll have the entire video on the site after we're done. But shout out to Coop, our sponsor. You might have consumed a few Coops last night after whatever it was that we watched out in Fort Worth. But me and Carson Cunningham kind of breaking down what we saw, what we think, and putting a bow on the entire season. Carson, how surprised were you with what transpired against TCU on Saturday?
I guess not that surprised. I was asked to give a pick, and I said, look, I think Oklahoma State's going to win, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if they just kind of slogged their way through it and won a close game. I didn't expect them to lose, certainly, but it really has been the story of the entire season. Like they've played down to the bad teams and they've played up to the good. What are the reasons for that? I'm sure we'll delve into, but I thought it was kind of like I was oddly accepting of how inept the performance was. I was oddly not as surprised as I probably should have been if they could look that inept. I mean, the depths in which they were inept are deep. It went back to like the 2009 Bedlam game in which Gundy wasn't trying to win when he was running third down toss sweeps on third and long.
Yeah.
It was every bit as brutal of an ending to a season that's been brutal to watch for the most part. So I wasn't that surprised, but ultimately, I think Gundy and everyone involved is scratching their heads like, how could this be?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I was at the press conference set up in TCU Stadium, which you've covered games there, is totally bizarre. It's like it's like not in a room. It's like in the middle of underneath the stadium, and so you've got all these people walking by with all these containers of things, and it's super loud. And Gundy was. He just appeared he appeared lost. Like he said it's the dangest thing I've ever seen. And there couldn't be a better way to sum it up because that's what it is. He appeared like he's like, I don't have any answers, and if I did, I would give them to you. I would have given them to the team, which is fine. I understand what he's saying, but isn't that, Carson, what he gets paid to do, is come up with answers for why they can't beat teams that they're favored against?
Absolutely, and that's not what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, well, golly gee, I have no idea. Like, you're paid $5 million to know exactly what's wrong with your team. And I guess we can go down your 10 thoughts. I think that would be a good way to kind of break the game down.
Yeah.
But just off the top, and I feel like we've talked about this every time they've lost, and I know they got it within a touchdown, but just the way this season ends, you go 6-6, and what do you get out of it? You get zero experience for any other quarterback on the roster that's going to play next year. Wood T's not going to play over Spencer Sanders or Drew Brown, and it got you 6-6, and it got you losing to the worst teams in the league. It feels like a lost opportunity with the new redshirt rule. To me, was almost a godsend to play Spencer Sanders. I mean, it's the anti-situation they had with Mason Rudolph, where you can play him and still preserve his year. And look, I know Cornelius played great against the good teams. I won't understand, and this is something I need Gundy to explain to me next time I get a chance to ask him a question, is In years past, he's had a quick trigger finger on the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to Clint Shelf. 2 series into the first game of the season, he benches Clint Shelf for J.W. Walsh. That was weird. But he was not hesitant to bench either one of those guys. He was not hesitant to bench Bobby Reed back in the day. He was hesitant to bench Alex Cate and Zach Robinson. But the lack of a trigger finger at quarterback when a game is clearly moving in one direction in which you can change the momentum. We see Big 12 teams change quarterbacks all the time. So the neglectance to do that in games in which their offense is stuck in the mud is just baffling to me.
Yeah, my counter to that, Carson, and this is something you've talked about all year. This is kind of a hill that you die on, and I respect it. I think it's right, is how do you look at your seniors and say, I don't know that we're playing the guy that gives us the best chance to win right now. And I get it. It's a weird situation, right? Like, because I agree with you. Like, I think looking back, it's easy in hindsight to say they should have played Spencer Sanders at some point or Drew Brown at some point if that's what you're going to do in 2019. But I don't know when you would have made that move, and I don't know that you could have looked at Justin Phillips and some of these other senior guys and said we're doing everything we can to win this West Virginia game, this TCU game, because I don't know that would have been true. Do you see what I'm saying there?
I think what you're saying is to my point. I don't think you're doing everything in your power to win if you keep running out a quarterback there who obviously doesn't have it on the day. I mean, how frustrated did Oklahoma State's receivers look? Do you think they would have thrown a fit if they made a change at quarterback?
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is for the season, because he plays like he did against Texas and against West Virginia, and you're like, well, you would never bench that guy. That guy's unbelievable. And so I get what you're saying, but do you want a quick trigger finger after a quarter, after a half? I don't know, maybe so. And I get it. Like, it's a complicated situation with the redshirt rule. I just don't know. I just think it's a little bit harder than we give it credit for when he would have made that move.
Yeah, I agree. But my point was he's done it before.
Yeah.
Why all of a sudden is it just set in stone? I mean, how many seasons has a team played no backup quarterback the whole year? Especially a team that goes 6-6. That's my point. It's not like this team was playing for the Big 12 championship.
Right.
And I'm asking for them to make a move. I mean, I'm asking to gain 100 yards and a half. And that's my biggest takeaway is the defense played well enough to win several of these games, and the offense just let them down. And again, it's not all Cornelius' fault too. I thought Yursich had a bad half, bad game. He's been bad in the losses as well. So it's not all on Cornelius, as your points were made. But we can go down your 10 thoughts if you like.
Yeah, let's start at number 1. I don't have them in front of me.
Oh, okay. Well, number 1, they're your thoughts, but number 1, fitting in, the roller coaster has come to a complete stop. And this is the most jarring and most appropriate stat to sum up the season is they were 3-5 as a favorite, but they were 3-1 as an underdog. There's no real way to explain that other than they just get up and fired up and motivated to play the best teams in the league. When they see Texas on the sideline or Oklahoma, they obviously got more fired up than when they go to Manhattan or Fort Worth to play 2 teams that barely are making bowl games.
I have to think that comes back to Gundy. I mean, I don't care how you figure out how to do it, but and I get, like, he's like, well, we had good practices and all this different stuff, but like you have to figure that out on some level. I got a stat for you, Carson. One of the guys that runs College Football Reference emailed me today and said Oklahoma State's the only team other than 1954 LSU to beat 3 top 20 teams and lose to 5 unranked teams. It's literally one of the most bizarre seasons in college football history. Forget 2018 or the last decade or since 2000. We go back 64 years to the last time a team beat 3 top 20 teams in a season and then also lost to 5 unranked teams. It's historically unprecedented, and I think that's why you see coaches and players that are so confused after these games.
Did he send that stat out of mercy? He was just so baffled. He's like, I got to help pistols firing.
Well, he's an OSU guy, so he was just kind of we were commiserating together.
So he was wallowing in the misery.
Yeah.
Okay. Thought number 2, where was the offense averaging 1.4 yards per play on its first 37 plays? Kyle, they they threw a touchdown pass to Tyron Johnson on like the first series and got called back, and you were like, okay, they're going to roll again. I know it got taken back, but that touchdown pass to Tyron that got taken away felt like it was 2 weeks prior. Once that first half ended, it was so bad. And it's hard to be as bad as they were on offense as they were in today's day and age in the Big 12. And I know TCU's defense is good; they're one of the best in the league, probably right there with Iowa State. But there was no excuse for how inept they were. And you say Corn was inaccurate. OSU was playing its four-string running back. TCU's pass coverage was awesome. The offensive line was on its heels, and there was no creative play calling.
All those things. Every one of them. And, Carson, their first 10 drives, they totaled 57 yards. They averaged 5.5 yards a drive, not a play. We've seen Oklahoma State teams in the past average, that's like a pretty normal outing, is 5.5 yards a play. That might be even, average or below it. They averaged 5.5 yards a drive over the first 10 drives. It's not like it was this first quarter sample size. It was almost the first 3 quarters of the game that they were doing this. And it's just, Gundy said this after the game. He's like, I didn't like our game plan on offense. He said, I liked it going in, but then when I saw it, I didn't like it, which was hilarious. And I don't know. It was all of the above. But I think and I asked Mike Yursich about this. I think this team, maybe more than any team I've seen at Oklahoma State, is dependent on momentum, especially offensively. It's almost like they got that Tyron, because they look great, right, on the Tyron touchdown. It's almost like they got that taken away, and they're like, oh, well, we can't do this. We can't score. And for the next 3 quarters, they didn't do it. They didn't score. And they are just so momentum dependent, and when they don't have it, they just don't have it at all.
And that's a great way to put it. I thought that's perfectly put, because think back to all their wins. They really, for the most part, have just gotten hot for a half.
Yeah.
The Texas game, they were hot for a half. They kind of they didn't have no momentum in the second half. You think back to the West Virginia game, awful in the first half. They get that first score to start off the second half, and they roll from there. So you're right about the momentum. And I was wondering after the first couple series, Kyle, if they were just going to scrap the game plan like they did last week, just go 4 wide, run the same 6 or 7 plays they ran against West Virginia, and see if that would work, because what they were doing was not working.
Well, they did they went 4 wide a couple of times, and I feel like Corn just seemed like a beat slow. Like he just looked like, he was inaccurate, first of all, but a couple of the passes he made, they were just late, or I don't know. He was just off. And I think one thing we didn't appreciate, or don't appreciate maybe, about Rudolph and Whedon that he doesn't display, and this was your point last week, is he's just not consistent. He's not consistent at a high level. His highs are pretty high and they're pretty good, but the consistency is just not there with him. So when he's off, it's all bets are off. Anything can happen.
And it goes back to the momentum thing. I think when he's feeling good and feeling confident, he's stepping into throws, he's making plays with his feet. But when it's going poorly, Kyle, his footwork just completely breaks down.
Yeah.
How many times was he throwing off his back foot, going away from his body? It was he more than any player on the team too rides momentum. It feels like when he's hot, and when he is cold, he looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. When he's playing well, he looks like one of the best, if not the best returning quarterback in the league. So that was that, and that kind of leads us to your. Well, I guess we have one more here. 3, star neutralization. Chuba and Tylen had a combined 24 touches or targets and posted just 104 yards combined.
Not good. TCU just took Tylen away. They were intent on doing that, and it wasn't necessarily always double and triple coverage. They just had guys on him that could cover him for whatever reason. He did not have the kind of game that he's had against some of the better teams, and really throughout the year. And I thought that really, he's been their guy where it's like, we got to have a first down here. We need 2 first downs in a row. They go to him, and he just wasn't open.
And it's easy to say this now after the fact, but isn't it surprising that teams didn't treat him? I know he got kind of hot late in the season, but isn't it surprising teams didn't quite give him the James Washington treatment for these last 3 or 4 games?
Because they had Tyron on the other side.
Right. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like it took a while for teams to catch on like he is a James Washington. And if you take him away, all of a sudden Oklahoma State becomes a little more easier to defend.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit, but thought number 4, Corn the microcosm.
I mean,
I'll give you the floor.
Well, he's just a microcosm of the team, and I think you mentioned this a few weeks ago, but in the same way I don't understand this team, I don't really understand him, because, and Kyle Cox wrote about this earlier in the week, he just said, look, he's tracking with Whedon, with Rudolph in terms of these numbers. Touchdowns, yards per game, completion percentage. I mean, he's having these great games. 17 touchdowns, 17 total touchdowns to 2 interceptions against the 4 kind of top 20 teams that they played: OU, Texas, West Virginia, and Boise State. And then he'll go out against TCU, against Kansas State, against Texas Tech, and you're like, has this guy ever played quarterback before? And it's sort of the same thing we see with the entire team. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe Oklahoma State the program is just built in such a way that they go as their quarterback goes. I
guess that's really the only way I can think about it. I mean, but you're right. You said he laid another monstrous egg, and he did lead a somewhat of a comeback. They were down 1 touchdown. Once again, their special teams puts them in a horrible situation for the last drive. Dylan Stoner does not receive the punt. It rolls inside the 5. That really kind of, I thought, hampered their play calling from there. But no, Corn's been inconsistent. And look, I feel like we've said the same thing every week, whether it's a win or a loss. You know, at this point, it's a broken record.
Yeah.
But sure. So let's just move on. Number 5, coaching disparity. I thought this was a very good thought. You know, Gary Patterson. Of course, you say Gary Patterson was like sweating through his shirt. He would sweat through his shirt if he was coaching in Antarctica.
Yeah.
He's just a sweater by nature, but he was coaching his tail off. Gundy, he has this huge personality with these jokes, but he on the sidelines for the most part he's very stoic. Yeah. And but more than anything, I thought it was the way they coached and the way they went about it was a drastic difference.
Yeah, totally. And it was funny to watch. I mean, Gary Patterson's on the field running out to, you know, all these different things. And Gundy at one point, Oklahoma State was at the far end of the field, and he was not down there with him. He was at the very other end, almost watching from behind. And it was I'm always fascinated to watch what he's doing, what he's looking at, who he's talking to. He was down by almost by the mascot and the cheerleaders, just kind of hanging out watching the game, and it was striking to kind of watch those two go at it on Saturday.
Well, and 2, TCU was playing to get into a bowl game, so I thought the motivation level from the coach on down to the team was drastically different. Although, Kyle, I didn't realize this till Fox popped up the graphic. TCU was playing without they've had 20 players knocked out for the year with injury. That doesn't even include Kevontae Turpin, who got kicked off the team, their best player.
Yeah.
This team was like left for dead.
I know.
And they were playing a third-string quarterback.
And they finished ahead of Oklahoma State. Finished 9th in the Big 12, Carson. 9th in the Big 12.
Is that their worst showing since Gundy's first season?
I think it's their worst showing ever, because in the first season you had the Big 12 South. So you could only finish 6th. So technically I think it's their worst finish ever in the Big 12.
And we've talked about the inconsistency at quarterback, but the one consistent has been untimely penalties and turnovers, lack thereof.
Yeah. I thought the Chuba fumble was bad. He said it afterwards. He's like, I got to make that play. But then the roughing the punter penalty, I mean, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? The momentum's changing. You're getting the ball back. You got a chance to go down and kind of make it pretty interesting, and then you just give it away. And not to mention A.J. Green dropping an interception in the end zone. I mean, you're just giving away point after point after point. And like Gundy said, they're not good enough to overcome that. And that's we've been saying that all year. I mean, if people have heard the podcast or watched these videos, this is nothing new. This is just who they've become, and you're going to go 6-6 if you're going to be undisciplined and have these penalties and give the other team defensive touchdowns.
Yeah, and obviously penalties are always a reflection of discipline and a reflection of coaching. I just wonder how it went so awry. I mean, over the years Gundy's had this team or been in charge of the program. They've been one of the better teams at not committing stupid penalties.
Yeah. Sure,
they get penalized like most teams do, but the fashion and the drastic number in which they've gotten this year has been probably one of the biggest disappointments, if not the biggest. Because at least Taylor Cornelius has had some highs. And penalties have been just a constant. And it's something Mike Gundy, along with special teams, has to really reevaluate this offseason.
Did you see the ninth president give an executive order to Bundage after the face mask?
No, I didn't. What did he do?
He just got in his face, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? You know?
Well,
like, Bundage tried to rip the guy's head off.
Well, my dad pointed out that Gundy stuck to his "you're going to ride the bench" principle if you commit a dumb penalty like that. I think Bundage sat for a while, didn't he?
Yeah.
How about a positive thought, Kyle? It took us 7 thoughts to get to a positive one. How about this one? Justin Phillips' last regular season game. You were there, and he obviously stuck out to you.
He was awesome. I mean, I thought, I went back and looked, it's the second most total tackles he's ever had in a game. He had 12 tackles. He had 14 2 years ago against Texas Tech. But he stood out because it didn't seem like a lot of other guys wanted to be there. You know, it didn't seem like there was a lot of a lot of giddy up on either side of the ball. So maybe that's why he stuck out. But I just thought he was all over the field. He's a monster. I mean, he's got that kind of unique combination of size and speed where he's really fast, but he's also a huge guy. And I would not want to be a quarterback with him coming at me, with really any of those guys, but especially him. I thought he was phenomenal on Saturday.
Yeah, good for him. He's played a lot of football. Yeah. And he's played pretty well, and he's really a prototypical Big 12 linebacker, as you mentioned, with his speed. I did not realize, Kyle, that he played in 2014 Bedlam as a true freshman, and then redshirted his sophomore season. They were that thin, I guess, at linebacker at the time? That's crazy.
They were, and he had 10 tackles in that Bedlam game, because I remember he hadn't played a lot that freshman year, and then he played in that game, and I was like, who is this guy? I mean, he's all over the place. And, so I asked him about that last night, just kind of, you know, how is he going to remember kind of this season and this team, and he mentioned kind of the highs of the season and just how much fun it's been. And so that was a cool thing. And just talk, you know, to hear those guys talk about, like, I'm just glad I get to enjoy a bowl game and a trip with these guys that I've become so close with. And so I think that's the aspect that maybe we don't talk about a lot, but that was cool to hear from him.
Yeah, good for him. Number 8, did you purchase a Jalen Reagor jersey on your way out of the stadium?
Dude, he carries himself, there's a little Dez in there. There's a little Dez.
I thought he looked like Peter Warrick when he touched the ball. Like, I knew he was a good player. Like, I've watched him for a couple years now, and he was committed to OU out of high school, so obviously he was highly touted. But when he caught the ball, you got out of your seat a little bit. Like, whoa! Yeah. I did not realize he was that much faster, that much quicker than everybody else. It reminded me of Peter Warrick, and I liked your thought. They should have just ran the old Peter Warrick offense. He was like the original Wildcat. They would just put him at quarterback and snap it to him and say, just go run. Yeah. And it would work.
He was, I mean, obviously their quarterback was lacking. I mean, he was just not that great. And so every time they got it to Reagor, it was like an oh my gosh, what's going to happen moment. And I felt bad for Malcolm Rodriguez trying to run him down from behind, because there was a 0% chance that was happening. But yeah, he was awesome. And I thought that even when he wasn't scoring, like those last couple drives, they went to him to get first downs, to kind of put the game on ice, and I was blown away. He was pretty awesome. You said this, but he looks like an OU receiver, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And you mentioned the Rodriguez. When Rodriguez was chasing him on his touchdown, it looked like, you know, like on kickoffs where they kick it out of bounds all the way through the end zone, and like the kickoff team always, they have like this unwritten rule. They got to kind of jog through the goal line. Mm-hmm. Rodriguez was doing that just for appearances, because he was losing. He was like 30 yards behind him by the time he scored. He still kept running to the goal line.
Yeah, it was not good.
I thought that was strictly for film to prove that he was going to jog it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see here. Thought number 9, and this is kind of a theme I've had when I've been critical of Taylor Cornelius. It's been for this reason. Your thought number 9 is defense was good enough. Yeah, and it has been in a lot of these losses, and the offense has failed. And do I grade it on a curve? Sure I do, because OSU is built on offense. They are like Texas Tech. They're not going to win games with their defense. They have to win them with their offense. I thought at Baylor they played well enough. I thought at K-State they held on for dear life, and the offense could do nothing. And I thought it was much of the same at TCU. Yeah, totally. And people will look at the 31 points and be like, well, that's not very good, you know. But part of that's the defensive touchdown that Oklahoma State's offense literally gave them. And the other part, they had a ton of possessions.
I mean, Gundy mentioned this afterwards. He's like, we just kept putting him back out there because 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And if you give a team that many possessions, a team with Jalen Reagor on it, I mean, they're going to score at some point. And they did. And I mean, to hold them to basically on defense just 24 points in 14 possessions, an Oklahoma State offense should always win that game. I mean, always. I don't care if you've got penalties, turnovers, whatever. You have to win that game. But then you look back at their first 10 possessions, and they put up 5.5 yards a drive. I mean, you can't do that. And I thought the defense, they get a turnover on the first possession. I just thought they did plenty to win that game, and the offense kind of let them off the hook.
I agree. That's kind of one of my biggest takeaways of the entire season. That's how you end up 6-6.
Yeah.
Thought number 10, last one. Now what? Now what, Kyle? What bowl do you think they're heading to?
I don't know. I mean, they finished below teams that are not going to bowls in the Big 12. They finished below Texas Tech. and because they won more non-conference games, they're bowl eligible. But they might go to. I might be going back to Fort Worth for the Armed Forces Bowl on December 22nd, which would be just an atrocity. I mean, I think it's a Conference USA game. I think they're it's going to be interesting because it's probably going to come down to a bowl basically choosing between them and Baylor and Kansas State, kind of these bottom teams in the Big 12. You could see them in Phoenix. That'd be great. You could see them in the Liberty Bowl. I don't know. And some of it's dependent on, do Texas and OU both get into a New Year's Six Bowl? Does OU get into the playoff? Because that will affect kind of where they're slotted on the bowl schedule.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what bowl they go to. I do think they're going to be far more talented than the team they play in the bowl game, but wouldn't it be appropriate that they play down to whatever competition they face in the bowl game? And I think the most important question of now what is, what's this team look like next year? I mean, Spencer Sanders didn't play, Drew Brown didn't play, and I think Gundy's kind of painting himself in a corner here.
Yeah.
If Spencer Sanders plays out of this world and plays unbelievably well, people are going to criticize Gundy. If he comes out and struggles, people are going to criticize Gundy for not playing him and getting some experience.
It's a great point.
If he plays musical chairs with Drew Brown and Spencer Sanders, people are going to ask why he didn't do that last year. He has really painted himself into a corner with his quarterback.
Yeah, that's a great point. And now you're left with, you start the year and you're like, oh, Justice next year, JD, Chuba, you got all these guys coming back. You've got this highly touted quarterback. You've got all these receivers. And it's like, well, JD's gone. I think Justice is gone based on some kind of reporting that we've been doing.
Do tell.
Well, Kyle Boone had a report yesterday about how Justice was going to miss the TCU game, which he did, and kind of sourced that I think there's a pretty good chance. I think it's what he said, that he does not play in the bowl game and then just moves on to the NFL, which would be really a bad way to end his career, right? Not a bad way, but just an unfortunate way, because the last time we would have seen him, if that does take place, was in the OU game. And he just comes out in the middle of it, and that's it. And you don't know during the game that that's the last time you might see him in an Oklahoma State uniform. But I think that there's a pretty good chance that could happen. So if you've got Justice and J.D. King gone, then you've got a new quarterback that you're breaking in for the second straight year. And it's like, well, what was the point of 2018? If you go, and again, this is easy to say in retrospect, but if you go 6-6 and you're not prepping for the future, then what just took place?
I know, that's kind of my big question. I think they'll be. Do we think they'll be any better next year? Like that's the biggest question. Is this rebuilding year going to turn into 2 or 3 years? Because I think that was always the biggest point behind playing Spencer Sanders, is you're not winning the league this year. You went 6-6 with a walk-on redshirt, walk-on fifth-year quarterback. What have you really built for the future? You're basically starting from scratch. So for all the corn truthers out there, it's really not helped you at all going forward. In fact, you've had your worst season yet since maybe your first season. So I don't know. It's a rough place to be. 2014 they ended on a high. Perhaps they could do that with a bowl win. But the big difference between 2014 is they won their bowl game with their future franchise quarterback, and their franchise quarterback's been sitting on the bench all year.
Yeah, Yeah, I know. People should send in questions, by the way. We'll take a couple questions at the end. But I wanted to ask you, Carson, because you watched the game, you saw everything that took place. Do you think that Thailand, I think we all thought, I know I thought, and I think you thought going in, that Thailand was going to win the Biletnikoff. Do you think that's still going to happen, or have you wavered on that a little bit?
I think the Bama guy is going to win now. And it might be recency bias, but I think they're going to want to reward as many Alabama players as possible because they're far and away the best team in college football. But, I mean, he has better numbers than the kid from Alabama. I mean, I could pull him up, but it just comes down to the voting now. And I don't think everybody watches Oklahoma State on a weekly basis. I think a lot of people will see Alabama next to the kid's name and just pick him. So
well,
I thought when they announced the finalists, it was a fantastic list for Thailand because the Texas Tech guy was not on there. I thought he was his main competition. And I don't think they're going to give it to a guy from UMass. I just don't think that's happening. So, but after this week and that the Bama guy had a big game against Auburn, I think it might go to the Judy kid from Alabama.
I think it actually plays into Oklahoma State's advantage that people don't watch Oklahoma State, especially in the TCU game. And I think that I think it's hard because if, let's say the TCU game was the first conference game and they ended on the West Virginia or the Texas or even the OU, like if Bedlam was where it used to be, I think we'd both be saying, oh yeah, Thailand, not only does he deserve it, but he's definitely going to win it. And so I think a lot of this has to, and this is how the Heisman is decided, it's all about momentum at the end of the year. And I think that we're both looking at it and saying, Thailand didn't really have it after that TCU performance. So I don't know. I think they're still going to look at the stats and say, man, Thailand had a great year. He played really well against these top teams. But I think I'm with you, and I think the Alabama kid will win it as well.
Well, the Alabama guy now has 1,300 yards receiving and 13 touchdowns. And Thailand has 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns. So Thailand has more yards, but 2 less touchdowns.
I mean, 1,500 is a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing that's working against him is that he's Oklahoma State's 6-6, and Alabama.
Or no, I'm sorry. I combined those. I'm sorry. The Alabama guy only has 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. I combined both of his seasons. My bad. He has 1,000 yards. Thailand has 1,400 and 11 touchdowns.
Okay.
So they have the same amount of touchdowns. Thailand has 400 more yards. On paper, he had the better season.
Yeah.
But I think Alabama next to his name is going to be the deciding factor because they're pretty close.
Okay, we got a couple questions here. How funny would it be if Gundy went to all this trouble to redshirt Spencer and he leaves in 2 years because he's a superstar?
Like we were making jokes in the Slack about him coming out in the second half in a TCU uniform.
Yeah.
Or just it was an official visit to TCU. Like. Think about, like, he could leave this year, could he not? He could transfer like McCleskey or Tabo Monecki, right?
Yeah.
Like, how devastating to the program would that be?
That would be awful. It would be.
And I don't think that's happening, obviously, but I think it'll be interesting come spring to watch him and Drew Brown and see what they can do. But no, that would be. And what if Justice Hill shows up wearing a Michigan helmet? He could transfer to Michigan instead of going to pro.
Stop. What changes will take place for Oklahoma State? New offensive coordinator, are there any big sweeping changes that you would make if you're OSU?
Well, Larry Fedora's on the market. Cliff Kingsbury's on the market. No, I don't think there's going to be any sweeping changes. I will say this, though. The defense played better toward the latter half of the year, but, how happy is Gundy with the hire he made in Jim Knowles? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to make a change after 1 year, but I don't know. I don't know how firm a footing or how pleased Gundy was with that hiring.
Do you think it's more likely that Cliff Kingsbury will be the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State next year if Mike Yurcich takes a head coaching job, or that you will be in charge of uniforms in Stillwater next year?
Oh, me in charge? Like, Cliff could walk to Stillwater and wear a gold chain and a Gundy throwback, as you put it,
yeah,
and walk into Gundy's office and beg him for a job, and Gundy wouldn't take him. Like Gundy, like Lincoln Riley was sitting on the open market for several years when Gundy was looking for an offensive coordinator. And he didn't hire him because I think he realizes he was an up-and-comer and would be another Holgerson or Munkin or Fedora and would be hired as a head coach like the following year.
Yeah,
I think he knows the same thing with Cliff. If he were to hire Cliff, he'd be gone after a year, and he doesn't want that. That's the only reason he hired a Division III offensive coordinator. He knew he would stay, and that's exactly what's happened.
I think it might be a little low profile for Cliff to take the OSU job that's not even open that we're talking about. Let's see here. Okay, this is a good one to end on. Well, it's not a good one to end on, but it's fitting to end on. Is this the most disappointing season of the Gundy era?
I would say yes. I mean, what are the contenders? I mean, his first season, he had to kick off about half the team because they were Les Miles guys. And they were not Cowboy culture, we'll say.
Yeah.
He won one more game every year following until, 2010, 2009? I would say yes, and I don't really think it's all that close in terms of, we thought, like, what was the floor? 7 wins, 8 wins in the regular season?
I think the floor was 7-5. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And they went 6-6. And really, when you beat Texas, when you beat West Virginia, if your kicker can kick an extra point, you have a great chance to beat Oklahoma on their home field. They've shown potential. They can play with anybody in the league. So I think that makes them far more disappointing than any other team we followed, because most of the time they play right at or above expectations.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's certainly the most confusing. I think 14 was pretty disappointing because I think we don't really remember this, but I think we had pretty high hopes for Dax. I think the thing that saves 14 is obviously you win Bedlam, so it's hard to kind of equate that season with this season because it's almost like they were so bad and then they rebounded and spun themselves into the following year. And that's the thing, right, Carson, is like they use that as a springboard for Mason Rudolph into this next era. We haven't seen that yet, and I don't know when we will see it or if we'll see it. And so I think that's the part that leaves you feeling a little bit hollow and a little bit frustrated at the end of a 2018 season that could have been a springboard for 2019 and beyond.
Well, didn't J.W. Walsh get hurt in 2014? I have a hard time labeling a season in which you lost your starting quarterback. Basically, J.W. Walsh played 2 games in 2014. Yeah. I think we were probably excited based on him coming back. Chelf had just graduated. It was finally J.W.'s turn to be the guy, and he gets hurt very early on in the season. I think for me makes this season far more disappointing when you lose your starting quarterback in the first 2 games of the year.
Yeah. Okay, last thing. Somebody just suggested that Cliff should go to Kansas and be the offensive coordinator for Les Miles.
That would be like oil and water and gasoline. That would not be good. I mean, Cliff might get like an NFL head coaching job with the way they're hiring just young, up-and-coming coordinators. I mean, if Lincoln Riley is getting a head coaching job, I mean, Cliff's runs just as good of an offense, almost not quite as good as Lincoln, but he's being linked with every offensive coordinator job in the country. So he's not going to Kansas. Like he's already been linked with North Carolina, I guess maybe them.
Hey, get him that Adidas money, and anything is possible.
Kansas has the Kansas Adidas money. That goes to Bill Self. That's not for Les just yet. It's gonna be so fun when Les comes back to Stillwater. By the way,
yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
They put him up on that huge jumbotron. He takes off the top hat and just gives a salute to the crowd. That'll be a cool moment because I think he left in a very unceremonious way, but I think fans still kind of love and adore him and liked his fight and his resolve against Oklahoma.
Let her rip, baby. Let her rip. Okay, Carson, good stuff. Thanks, everybody, for checking this out. If you missed the beginning, we're going to post this on the website. Thanks again to Coop for sponsoring us all season. We will be back at it, I believe, on Wednesday with a podcast kind of wrapping the season, talking about the basketball tournament, which we obviously haven't talked about. But, yeah, good stuff, and we'll talk soon, Carson.
Sounds good. We'll
see
you.
See you.